Previously on Abba Knows Best Pod.
Have you ever given your tithe of the grain of the field, the flock, the wine, the oil? Have you ever tithed to Yahuwah from those things? And if you have not, what you have been doing, would that be considered tithing unto Yahuwah?
Welcome back to Abba Knows Best Pod. This is part 2 of Tithes and Offering. I want to start off with the scripture, Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 24. I think the last time we read from verse 22 and 23, but now we're going to continue on verse 24. Verse 24, and if the way be too long for you, so that you are not able to carry it, or if the place be too far from you, which Yahuwah Eloheka shall choose to set his name there, when Yahuwah Eloheka has blessed you, verse 25, then shall you turn it into money, and bind up the money in your hand, and you shall go unto the place which Yahuwah Eloheka shall choose, verse 26, and you shall bestow that money for whatsoever your soul lusts after. Now, bestow, what they mean by that is you're going to exchange it. Exchange the actual tithe of the grain, the wine, the oil of the firsting of the flocks. You're going to exchange that, sell that product, obtain the money, and for whatsoever your soul lusts after, for oxen, or for sheep, or for wine, or for strong drink, or for whatsoever your soul desires, and you shall eat there before Yahuwah Elohaka, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. Now, if you notice, this is different from what is being taught in the church. The tithe itself, I was always told never to eat your seed. In church, I remember they would equate the seed to the actual tithe, the money. And they would say, don't eat your seed. So what they were basically saying was, before you pay a bill, before you take care of your own needs, you take care of the needs of the church, and you're supposed to be given to God. And they wanted you to take that first fruit and give it to the church. But we can see the scripture clearly distinguishes between what is tithe and what is money. So I've gotten out of the place of trying to interpret what is being said. We don't need any interpretation when we just read all the scripture. Now you will have a decision whether you want to believe it and follow his word or continue down the road that you've gone. I had to decide that this scripture was more important than my tradition, what I brought up understanding. The scripture is more important. So let's continue. Um, and you shall eat there before Yahuwah Elohaka, and you shall rejoice, you and your household, and the Levi that is within your gates. You shall not forsake him, for he has no part nor inheritance with you. Now, the 12 tribes, every tribe was given an inheritance of land. And when Yahuwah returns, we will go, and he returns and he brings New Jerusalem. All tribes will have an inheritance of land there, except for the Levites. Their inheritance is Yahuwah. Okay? So that is based upon bloodline. So if any preacher or pastor tries to equate or compare themselves, to a priest, that's just not right. It's not scriptural. priesthood is based upon bloodline. You were a priest if you were a son of the Levitical priesthood, actually connected to them DNA wise. It wasn't based upon someone just had a calling and say, now I'm a preacher, a pastor, or a priest now. So now you bring the tithes to me. That's not true. That's not scriptural. And as we go through this lesson, we'll explain and I'll uncover where that came from. It didn't come from where you think it comes from or came from. It actually came from a specific source. Okay. So that's what the scripture says. He wants us to actually be producers. He wants us to start to plant in the fields again. And from the plant, from the oil, from the wine, from the firstling of the flocks, that's what he wants us to give tithes of. 10%, the first fruit, okay? So that he can bless us. But he doesn't want us to just give it to him. He wants us to eat it in his presence with us in our family. Worship. He loves to sup with us, to eat with us, to fellowship with us. Yahushua HaMashiach said the same thing during Passover or Pesach. He told his disciples he was so ready. He couldn't wait to be able to sit down and break bread with them because that's fellowship. So verse 28, at the end of 3 years, you shall bring forth all the tithe of your increase the same year. So that means that you should store it up. See, they tried to say the church was a storehouse, but we're supposed to have a storehouse as well that we bring. Okay, I'm going to explain. Go back to 28. At the end of 3 years, you shall bring forth all the tithe of your increase the same year, and you shall lay it up within your gates, within your gates. And the Levi, because he has no part nor inheritance with you, the stranger and the fatherless and the widow, which are within your gates, shall come. So what they used to do, there was actual storehouse. So of course you're going to have a storehouse because you have to gather that and put it in the large storehouse. So you bring it all in to the large storehouse. The large storehouse was not church. It was truly a storehouse stored with food, not money, not things, but food. Okay. So the food was supposed to have been stored in the storehouse. And he's going to explain why. Verse 29, and the Levite, because he has no part nor inheritance with you, and the stranger, and the fatherless, that's the what? That's the orphans, and the widow, which are within your gates, shall come and shall eat and be satisfied. So the storehouse, so everyone individually had a storehouse, because anyone who does planting, they understand they have their own storehouse, okay? We just started planting ourselves. So you have to have a storehouse. You have to have somewhere to store the the increase, store the food. Okay. So you're supposed to, after 3 years, gather that up and take it into the large storehouse within your gates, within the community. Everyone's supposed to do that. Every household. So they had put that into the storehouse from each family, then it would have been more than enough for the stranger, the orphans, the widow, and of course the Levite. Okay, that I'm going to complete this the verse that Yahuwah Elohaka may bless you in all the work of your hand which you do. So that's how we are blessed by Yahuwah. You're not blessed by giving money. I don't know about you, but I have never heard a homeless person come up to me and say, "I'm so hungry. Would you please purchase some shoes for me?" When somebody's hungry, they don't want things. They don't want uh, items such as clothing, shoes, house. They want food. So it's going to be very hard to feed people if you don't have food. Um, so this scripture explains to us what tithes and offerings really all about. So I'm just reading the scripture. I'm not giving you my opinion. I'm trying to stay away from that from now on. The scripture is my opinion. I agree with the scripture. And it's up to you to agree or disagree. Know this, that I didn't write this scripture. And if you don't believe that Yahuwah inspired the scripture, then you'll have to face the judgment. But I'm just here to tell the truth, to walk you down this journey that I and my family are walking down, and we want you to understand how we have come to this reasoning, this revelation, if you will. So when I read that last scripture in Deuteronomy, it made me think about my experiences in the church. And one of the most famous scriptures that people like to use and read when they want to condemn people for not giving is in the book of Malachi. And the book of Malachi is a blessing because Yahuwah is really talking to us. He's really speaking to us. He's telling us everything that he's not liking about our walk. He's trying to get us back in the straight and narrow. So let me read this scripture. So now that we know what Yahuwah was truly talking about, the resources, the food, not the coin, not the money, he was talking about the food. So let's read in Malachi chapter 3, verse 8. It's a very popular scripture for churches to read to encourage people to give. I've always wondered why most churches state that the old covenant, Old Testaments passed away when Christ came on the scene, but yet and still they go back to Malachi when they want to encourage people to give. Selah. Malachi chapter 3, verse 8. Will a man rob Elohim? And by the way, I'm reading from the Sefer. They've gone back to the original Iverite tongue and they've done some due diligence and research, and they've uncovered the actual names in the scripture. Verse 8. Will a man rob Elohim or God? Yet you have robbed me. But you say, wherein have we robbed you? And he answers, in tithes and offering. You are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation. Now, if you remember, we read from Deuteronomy. That's part of the law as well. I know most of us are only accustomed to the 10 commandments, but it wasn't just 10. There were over 600 laws, okay? And so when Yahuwah, through Moses, stated what he wanted, even in Deuteronomy, our people, because I already stated that I know that we as the African Americans, we are part of the 12 tribes. We are Israelites, okay? So our forefathers told Yahuwah, promised, pledged, swore that, yes, we will keep these commandments. And he said, if you don't, you would be cursed. So he's reminding them. Verse 9, You are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation. Verse 10. Bring you all the tithes in the storehouse. Now, we talked about what the storehouse was and the function of the storehouse and the purpose of the storehouse. It says, I'm going to repeat that, verse 10. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house. That's literal. That's not figurative language. Yahuwah and Israel, we're not Western, so we don't use a lot of figurative language. The mostly is going to be literal. So when he says bring the tithes into the storehouse, after that there may be meat in my house, they're talking about actual food. Because, like I said, no one's going to be begging for food and then want shoes in return. And prove me now herewith, says Yahuwah Sevoth, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing that there shall not be room enough to receive it. He's talking about the rain. See, I told you already, my family and I are embarking on this new journey. We've been planning, and it's become successful by all praise to the Most High. But I know when he says, open up the windows of heaven, that's talking about the rain, because that's how crops grow. Verse 11, and I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, says Yahuwah Sabaoth. Now, uh, in times past, churches have equated that part of the scripture, the devourer, to Satan. And although Satan does come to kill, steal, and destroy, he's not talking about specifically Satan. He's talking about who he would use to devour your fruit. And those people who are watching the podcast now who are farmers, you know what I'm talking about. There's certain bugs, critters, birds who will devour your crop before it's time. And of course, Satan uses them, but Yahuwah will rebuke the devourer. Verse 12, and all nations shall call you blessed, for you shall be a delightsome land, says Yahuwah Sevoth. So as we know, as we can see now, this is very literal. And see, Yahuwah is trying to prepare us, even now in these last days. I have a question for you. What will you do when the Antichrist rises and the mark of the beast is presented? And they tell you, you can't withdraw from your bank account. You can't work and earn a living. You can't go to your grocery stores and purchase items that you need without the mark of the beast. What will you do? Now, I know some of you are already thinking about the rapture, and I'm going to touch on that in a series to come. Not right now. But you need to listen to this. You need to follow the scripture and heed the warning of Yahuwah. We must be producers. For those who are in America, you just experienced what it looks like when the government shuts down for a period of time. And unfortunately, those government workers, some of them had to work and they could not get a living. They could not pay their bills. They had to call their creditors and ask for more time. That's not a way to live. That's not a way to live. So you must become a producer and not just a consumer. The scripture is telling us in Deuteronomy, and it follows up with Malachi. There's a blessing in following the scriptures. So I just wanted to follow up from part one. There will be a part three, because in part three, I'm going to discuss and explain to you and unfold and uncover what happened to the definition of tithe. How did we go from knowing that we're supposed to give the tenth of our increase to thinking that it changed just because we had the Industrial Revolution? So, like, subscribe, and share. Shalom.